Good afternoon, everybody. It's Mike the Bowtie Writer here. Happy Tuesday. So today I wanted to take a little bit and have just a very short conversation about books. I don't want to spend too much time today belating the obvious, but also on the other hand, because something is obvious, it's really easy to miss. I know I certainly overlooked it for a long time. Namely, what I want to talk about today is simply this. If you want to be a published writer, you need to read the genre that you want to be published in. This whole video came about because I was listening to some friends talk about their reading, and they basically were saying, we can't stand reading any of the current fantasy anymore. And that conversation, frankly, just drove me nuts, especially because one of these people said they want to be an aspiring writer. You can't be an aspiring writer if you just positively refuse to read anyone who's influential in the genre. So listening to these friends, especially this inspiring writer who was saying that they flat out could not read current fantasy, just drove me up a wall. Because if you want this to be your job, part of your job is to stay current in the genre. You need to understand what's out there. Okay, so I also do want to be perfectly clear about this. This is a rant that says you want to be a professional, you want to be a published writer, you want to do this as your job. If you do not want that, if that's not your goal, that's okay. I'm not saying that you should bend yourself in half trying to read very widely and read all these influential people if that's not your goal. I suggest reading widely because you can find lots of interesting books that you might not have discovered before, but again, there are different standards. It depends upon what you're trying to achieve. If this is just a hobby, don't feel bad for what you're reading. Read what you enjoy. Just understand that if you want to be published, if you want to be successful as a genre author, you need to be reading that genre. And when you shift those expectations, some of those reading habits also need to shift. Genre is an ongoing conversation, and that's why it's important that you're current on the certain conversation. If you want to write mystery, you'd better be reading a lot of mystery besides just the #1 bestsellers. You need to know who the big names are and what they write. Similarly, if you want to write fantasy, you need to know the important names. Do you know who N.K. Jemisin is? Do you know why she's kind of a bamf? Kate Elliott has been writing epic fantasy for years and has been incredibly influential. Have you heard of Max Gladstone? Brandon Sanderson, Patrick Rothfuss. These are both incredibly influential authors, and some people really love them, some people can't stand them, but have you at least checked out their works to understand why these books have sold millions of copies? Shannon McGuire has written dozens of books. Do you know what kind of books she writes? Why is Cameron Hurley a big deal? Have you actually read her stuff? So this does lead to a problem, though. After all, there's so many books published every year. How can you possibly keep up with it? Well, that part's tricky. One is that I would say you don't need to allow yourself to read the entire canon of someone's work. Staying current is really important, and another way that you can stay current is actually by following awards and seeing what books are nominated and what books are on the ballot and also what books have won the awards. I'm not saying that you need to read just and only those books that are eligible for those awards or that have won those awards. I'm just saying that if you start seeing names crop up again and again on these lists, you might want to take a look and read some of their work to figure out what the big deal is. Now, I'm not saying again that you will love every single book that's out there. I'm not saying that every single influential person in the genre writes perfectly, or that their books are without issues, or that they just might not be your taste. That's fine. All of those things can be true. But when you're trying to read broadly like this, you need to understand why these books have appeal. What is it that people like about them? Also, on top of this, when we're talking about reading these books, the other thing to pay attention to when you're reading these books is paying attention to their craft. Part of the reason you should read a lot of different writers is to be exposed to a lot of different writing styles. You can see the differences in tone, in language, in content, and that wide variety is going to give you more tools in your toolbox. Also, I would suggest avoid the mistake that I made a long time ago. I used to think that I needed to read all the influential works leading up till now. That was my plan. So I started reading famous books from the 80s and working my way forward, and to be perfectly honest, it was a waste of time. I mean, it was fun reading. I enjoyed the reading, but from a craft perspective, it was not the best use of my time. It's like trying to keep up with gossip by reading gossip columns from 1995. It's just out of date. Okay, slightly paradoxically, the next thing that I will say is I will also suggest that you do not read exclusively your genre. You should also try to read a little bit of the other genres, again, just to get some variety. Mystery books know how to set up a good mystery. Thrillers know how to get you to turn the pages. You can learn stuff from all of them. Genres like romance are frequently dismissed or derided, and yet they have some of the best characterization that you will see. Plus, that's not even touching all the YA fantasy that is very good that does also exist. Have you paid any attention to that? You might want to, because YA fantasy sales tend to be stronger than regular genre fiction as a whole. So sampling some of these other genres can give you a wider perspective, and again, it can widen your toolbox. Lastly, don't just pay attention to authors. The other thing to pay attention to is, what are the publishing houses involved? What are the editors? Different editors have different things that they like. Different publishing houses have different kinds of things that they publish. That can help you when you're trying to position your work to pitch it, because you know what it's like. You know what it's compared to in the current marketplace. That's going to carry a lot more weight than if you just try to say that your work is like Tolkien, because a lot of things are like Tolkien. That's not something that they can easily market. I hope I'm not beating a dead horse, and I hope I'm not making you feeling bad for reading. I write, and part of the reason that I write is because I love reading books. I enjoy reading books. And it was definitely a shift in my mindset for me to start going, I should be trying to consciously branch out in my reading and not just chase whatever I want to read. You shouldn't feel bad for what you like, but you should also be conscious about working on it. Anyways, I'll climb down off my soapbox now. I'll quit ranting. I'll stop being grouchy about this. But seriously, that's so important. Try to stay current in your genre. I promise that I'll be back with a nuts and bolts video next week that'll be a little bit more in-depth about some more technical aspects of writing, but this was just something that I couldn't pass up talking about. That being said, let's talk about books. What are some interesting books that you've read lately? Let me know down in the comments. I'm really curious. Also, what books are you looking forward to reading in 2018 that are coming out? So that's it. That's all I have for this week. I'm Mike the Bowtie Writer. I will see you all next time.